A 5-gallon receptacle rests in the far corner of a patio area. Within its confines, discarded banana skins, freshly cut grass, and a few uprooted weeds bob in cloudy water. 10 days prior, this was merely kitchen refuse and garden trimmings, the sort of waste typically bundled and left curbside weekly. Today, the liquid within has transformed to the rich hue of robust black coffee, exuding an earthy, faintly acidic, yet vibrant aroma. A gardener retrieves a dipper, mixes its contents with water in a spray reservoir, and proceeds to a patch of tomato plants that have been faltering throughout the growing season. A light application of mist upon the foliage, nothing ostentatious, merely a gentle spritz on both upper and lower leaf surfaces, before returning indoors for their morning beverage. 48 hours hence, these same tomato plants exhibit a remarkable metamorphosis. Leaves that were previously pallid and curled now stand erect. Their verdant hue has deepened by 2 shades. The stalks appear more substantial and robust. A significant shift has occurred, and it incurred absolutely no financial outlay. This is what seasoned horticulturists refer to discreetly as liquid vitality, a fermented botanical extract so potent it renders most commercially produced foliar sprays akin to costly water. No prepackaged kits, no specialized components, simply discarded yard and kitchen remnants, a modicum of forbearance, and a scientific principle that has been readily observable for more than 70 years. 1. The Cold War revelation that redefined plant nourishment. Here is a query that often perplexes even seasoned cultivators. Precisely how does a plant assimilate its sustenance? The conventional understanding, that roots draw moisture and minerals from the soil, was long considered immutable, unassailable scientific dogma. Every academic text espoused it. Every horticultural curriculum perpetuated it. Roots were deemed the plant's oral aperture, and that concluded the discussion. Then, the 1950s dawned, and a pair of university researchers inadvertently redrafted the established tenets. In the aftermath of the Second World War, the United States Atomic Energy Commission sought to identify non-military applications for nuclear technology. They financed a series of investigations at Michigan State University, spearheaded by 2 academics whose contributions warrant far greater acclaim. Dr. H.B. Tukey, the esteemed head of the Department of Horticulture, and Dr. S.H. Whitwer, his collaborator and research associate. Their experimental methodology resembled something from a speculative fiction narrative. They employed radioactive isotopes, specifically radioactive phosphorus and radioactive potassium, and instead of introducing them into the soil, as was the mandated procedure at the time, they applied them directly to the leaves of living flora. Subsequently, they observed, and then they activated a Geiger counter. The clicking was instantaneous, vigorous, and undeniable. The radioactive nutrients were not merely resting on the leaf surfaces awaiting dissolution by subsequent rainfall. They were being absorbed directly into the plant's internal systems through minuscule apertures known as stomata, tiny openings on the leaf epidermis that typically go unnoticed. The nourishment was traversing the plant's vascular network at a calculated velocity of 1 foot per hour. This finding alone was of considerable import. However, the truly astonishing revelation, the statistic that ought to have fundamentally altered the approach to plant feeding for every gardener and agriculturalist globally, was the comparison of efficacy. When liquid nourishment was administered via the soil, Dr. Tukey and Dr. Whitwer documented that plants utilized approximately 10% of the applied substance, merely 10. The remaining 90% was squandered, immobilized by soil chemistry, carried away by precipitation, or leached into subterranean aquifers beyond the reach of any root system. When these identical nutrients were applied directly to the foliage, utilization soared to 95%. Let that fact resonate for a moment. The discrepancy between soil-based nourishment and foliar application is not a marginal 10 or 20%, it is nearly tenfold. A plant nourished through its leaves assimilates virtually all that it receives. Dr. Tukey presented these findings to the Joint Committee on Atomic Energy. He proclaimed foliar feeding to be the most efficient method of delivering nutrients to plants ever recorded in scientific literature. So, Why did this groundbreaking discovery fail to become widespread knowledge within horticultural circles? Why are garden supply stores still stocked predominantly with granular soil amendments rather than foliar solutions? The explanation is not rooted in conspiracy. It is far more straightforward. It is an economic consideration. A home gardener who masters the creation of a cost-free foliar spray from discarded yard materials does not purchase bags of synthetic fertilizers. The pursuit of profit subtly suppressed one of the most significant horticultural advancements of the 20th century. Not through clandestine means, but through quiet neglect. The underlying science, however, has persisted. It has been corroborated consistently over the subsequent decades, and today, anyone possessing a simple receptacle, some kitchen scraps, and a measure of patience can harness its benefits. Yet, effective foliar nourishment necessitates nutrients in a liquid form that leaves can readily absorb. Where do these vital nutrients originate without incurring any expense? 2. The immutable law of nature. Prior to combining any elements, it is beneficial to grasp a fundamental principle that underpins every flourishing ecosystem on our planet, and which most domestic gardeners inadvertently contravene on a weekly basis. Envision a forest, not a meticulously maintained coppice or an urban park, but an ancient woodland that has remained undisturbed for centuries. No artificial fertilization is applied, no scheduled irrigation is administered. No weeds are eradicated, and no fallen leaves are gathered. Yet, the soil beneath such a forest is among the most fertile and biologically active earth found anywhere. The reason for this is not enigmatic, it is mechanical. Everything that flourishes within that forest eventually succumbs and provides sustenance for the subsequent generation. Leaves descend in autumn and decompose throughout winter. Branches fracture and disintegrate into the soil. Fruit ripens and falls, decaying in situ. Deceased roots become nourishment for fungi, which in turn sustain bacteria, which then nourish plants. Nothing departs the cycle. Every mineral element extracted is ultimately returned. Soil scientists have a specific designation for this principle, the law of return. Dr. William Albrecht, a pioneering agronomist from the University of Missouri, conducted extensive studies on this cycle during the 1940s. Across the Atlantic, Lady Eve Balfour initiated the Hawley experiment in England, one of the inaugural long-term comparative studies of organic versus chemical agriculture, and arrived at an identical conclusion. The directive is unambiguous. Whatever a living system withdraws from the soil, it must, in due course, replenish. Disrupt this equilibrium and the soil gradually languishes. Herein lies the direct connection to the backyard garden. The majority of home gardeners violate the law of return each week without conscious awareness. They uproot weeds and bag them for municipal collection. They mow their lawns and transport the clippings to the curb. They discard banana peels and vegetable remnants into the kitchen refuse. With each such action, minerals that plants have extracted from the earth, sometimes from considerable depths, are permanently removed from the property. This is analogous to making withdrawals from a bank account without ever initiating a deposit. The balance diminishes slowly, imperceptibly, until one day the garden's productivity declines and the reason remains elusive. Liquid vitality completely subverts this pattern. It repurposes the very materials that most gardeners expend resources to discard, weeds, grass, kitchen scraps, and reintegrates them into the garden in a liquid format, readily absorbable by plants through their leaves. The ensuing logical inquiry: what precisely imbues these commonplace scraps with such nutritional value? The answer resides in the distinct chemical composition of each constituent, and it elucidates why this combination rivals products that retail for $15 to $20 per bottle. 3. Three cost-free components that surpass commercially available fertilizers. Consider the banana peel. Daily, millions of these are deposited directly into kitchen receptacles across the nation. Most individuals give it no further consideration. That peel is replete with potassium. And potassium is not merely another mineral designation on a fertilizer label. It is the specific nutrient that governs the opening and closing of stomata, the very leaf pores that the 1950s researchers identified as the conduit for foliar nutrient uptake. A plant deficient in potassium cannot effectively regulate its own respiration. It wilts more readily under heat, recovers more sluggishly from stress, sheds blossoms before they can mature into fruit, and yields less substantial harvests. Potassium is the mineral that confers structural resilience upon a plant, enabling it to withstand wind, heat, and arid conditions without succumbing. The nanopeels also contain substantial quantities of magnesium. This element's significance is often underestimated by gardeners. Magnesium is not a secondary component in plant physiology. It plays a pivotal role. It forms the central element within every molecule of chlorophyll in every green leaf on the planet. In the absence of adequate magnesium, chlorophyll production diminishes, leaves become pallid, and photosynthesis, the fundamental engine driving plant growth, operates at a significantly reduced pace. Now, introduce fresh grass clippings into the equation. Newly mown grass is, in essence, a nitrogen reservoir. Every verdant blade is packed with nitrogen, the nutrient crucial for vegetative expansion. This facilitates the development of robust stems, vigorous new foliage, and the kind of luxuriant greenness that imbues a garden with a sense of vitality and thriving health. Most gardeners invest considerable sums in nitrogen-rich fertilizers, while simultaneously bagging free nitrogen every time they mow their lawns, disposing of it at the curb. The third ingredient may prove to be the most surprising of all: common garden weeds. Dandelions, clover, plantain, lamb's quarters. If comfrey or stinging nettle are present, even better. Most gardeners perceive these plants as adversaries, bothersome nuisances to be eradicated, poisoned, or decried. However, weeds possess a latent capability that cultivated vegetable plants do not share. Weeds develop deep taproots. Some penetrate depths of 2, 3, or even 4 feet below the surface. At these subterranean levels, they extract trace minerals that shallow-rooted crops like tomatoes, peppers, and lettuces are incapable of accessing. Iron, silica, zinc, manganese, boron. Why are trace minerals of such paramount importance? John Kempf, a highly regarded authority in contemporary regenerative agriculture, has highlighted that most garden plants today are operating at merely 15 to 20% of their inherent photosynthetic potential. This is not due to a lack of sunlight, nor is it attributable to insufficient water. It is because they are deprived of specific trace minerals, particularly manganese and iron, which act as catalysts in the photosynthetic process. Without them, the biological machinery functions, but at a fraction of its capacity. The amalgamation of banana peels, grass clippings, and deep-rooted weeds yields a composite substance that most commercially produced fertilizers simply do not provide. It offers a comprehensive nutritional spectrum, encompassing everything from essential macronutrients like nitrogen and potassium down to the trace elements that unlock a plant's true genetic capabilities. However, herein lies a critical consideration. If all of this raw organic material is introduced into a receptacle of water and left exposed to the sun, the outcome within a week will be a malodorous, pathogen-laden slurry, undesirable for both one's garden and one's olfactory senses. The subsequent stage is what distinguishes liquid vitality from outright failure, and it involves a collective of microscopic agents that humanity has relied upon for millennia. 4. The ancient microorganisms that facilitate the entire process. The divergence between a receptacle filled with decaying organic matter and one containing a potent liquid fertilizer hinges upon a singular factor: which specific microorganisms assume control of the process. In an uncontrolled receptacle, undesirable microbes predominate. Putrefactive bacteria proliferate, decomposing organic material through decay rather than fermentation, generating noxious gases and fostering an environment conducive to the growth of harmful pathogens like E. coli and Salmonella. This is decomposition. It possesses an offensive odor. It poses potential health risks and offers minimal nutritional benefit to plants. Fermentation, conversely, is an entirely distinct biological phenomenon. To guide the receptacle towards fermentation rather than rot, it is imperative to introduce the appropriate microorganisms from the outset. The requisite bacteria are lactic acid bacteria, commonly known as LAB. These are the same organisms that have discreetly served humankind for millennia. They transform milk into yogurt. They convert flour and water into artisanal sour